All right. Paul, I've got 2 o'clock on the dot. You know, I like to start on time. Welcome, everybody. This is the Greater Baton Rouge ASSP Leadership Gold Series, week 3. If you've joined us for every week, just go ahead and give me one of them thumbs up emojis. If you've been here, go ahead and give me one of those thumbs up emojis. If you've enjoyed it, you've had a blast so far. Give me one of them other reactions like a heart or something so that I can see it. Let's get it flowing in here in the virtual room. If you've enjoyed every week so far, sorry, Hunter, you haven't. I know it's okay, but look at this. This is great. We got a lot of interaction going on. We can't wait to hear you this week. We've got Paul Leonard up, and I'm excited to introduce Paul. Paul and I worked together at back at Entergy at his time when he was a VP there. If you want to read about his bio, he's going to tell a little bit about himself, but he is going to talk to us today about something very important, and that is legacy and development and really this cathedral thinking approach. And I just can't wait to hear him. Paul, tell us a little about yourself. Jump on in. Tell us how today is going to go, man. Thanks for being with us.
Hey, thanks, Justin. Really happy to be here. The last couple of weeks have been great. So, yeah, who am I? I am proud to be Irish, have an American passport too. Very proud to be American as well by choice. But this is what you do when you first realize you're Irish. Father to 4 great kids, and my amazing wife, Rochelle. And I've been humbled to have worked for 4 great companies all over the world, in particular in the EHS field for the past 15 years. I have a motto that I like to use. It's helping prevent unplanned events globally. And I have now, since I left Energy last year, I have my own small consulting company called G.O.L.D, and I'm the principal there. This is a T-shirt someone got for me a couple of years ago. Just said, keep calm, let the Irish guy handle it. Particularly in the EHS world, you got to stay calm and not go crazy. From a career perspective, I'm a chemical engineer by trade, so to speak, from University College Dublin. I started as a process engineer with Dow Chemical in Germany in 1985, probably before many of you were born. I've spent 27 years with Dow in Germany, France, Michigan, China, and Texas. So Dow moved me around the place quite a bit. 26 of those years were in operations and only 1 year in pure HSE role. In 2012, I got an opportunity to go to Paris to work with Arkema as vice president for HS&E, and that's where it really became my passion. I left there in 2019, moved to Mexico City to join Orbia, previously Mexichem, and spent 2 years working with them before moving in 2021 to join Entergy in Houston. I've got to say, I'm very proud that I left every job with better HSE performance than where I started. And again, on a lot of my slides, you see hashtag zero is possible, because I really believe that we got to get to zero fatalities. What do you take away? On the right, if you're in the chat, if any of you know what this is, just throw it in the chat if you know what this church cathedral is. So today, I hope you're going to learn something about cathedrals. You'll learn why we need to take a long-term approach when we're doing vision value alignment. And I'll throw out some tools, reference that hopefully you'll gain deeper understanding of how creating your own legacy and help further your own development. You might not see the end of what you set out to do, but if you set the foundation, that's a huge step in helping achieve a longer-term vision. I didn't see anything in the chat. Anybody? Oh, I'm not seeing the chat. So
You got New Orleans, St. Charles, then New Orleans, Paul. So
That's it. You know where it's at. And I try to use pictures when I'm talking about the cathedrals. I visited this. Obviously, Entergy was headquartered in New Orleans. Visited this several times. Took some pictures. So it's the cathedral there in New Orleans. So to jump into this, I try to get people interested. And this is do you remember where you were on a specific date? if you're my age or a little bit younger, you might remember Y2K. Do you know where were you? Y2K, December 31st, 1999. We all thought our computers were going to get messed up that year. And I know where I was. I was working with Dow, and I was a plant manager in Midland, Michigan. Fortunately, the US, we were like hours behind China and Europe, and we were lucky that, as the day went on, we saw actually nothing happen. So all the stress we thought was going to happen was great. So that's a day, I'm sure people have particular memories of where they were in that date. Another more tragic was 9/11, right? September 11th, 2001. We all remember seeing these pictures, absolutely tragic. I remember where I was there too. So, these are dates that are ingrained in your memory. If someone asks you, where were you on 9/11, you know exactly where you were. So here's a date I think many of you probably don't have on your calendar. It's April 15, 2019. Anybody have an idea, what happened there? Does that date ring a bell? Maybe my T-shirt. I got a special Notre Dame T-shirt for this presentation. Um, so that was actually the day when Notre Dame burnt. So some of you might remember that. It made the news globally, obviously. Again, special day for me, one, because I've always interested in cathedrals. I've been in Notre Dame at least 100 times, and I was actually living in Paris at that time when this happened, and I was only 20 minutes walk from the cathedral that evening. I was meeting people for dinner downtown Paris, and we saw first of all, the traffic mess, then we could see the smoke. So big thing for me, that date certainly stays in my memory. And these are some other cathedrals. On the left, you've got Chartres, another cathedral about 50 miles south of Paris. Right is the sort of cleaned up version of Notre Dame. Here on the left, you've got Strasbourg Cathedral. Interesting thing about this is that the second spire, you only see one spire here. The second spire was never built. But it is very renowned. I lived down in the Strasbourg area. One of my tours of duty with Dow, I spent 7 years down there. Been in that cathedral 100 times too. Don't know how many times I walked to the top of that, the complete spire, but that, just really, really interesting. On the right is a cathedral in Barcelona, very unique, called Sagrada Familia. I don't know if anybody's been there or had a chance to visit. Really well worthwhile if you ever get a chance. And actually, I just saw a program on Sky News where they were putting the top of the final tower on this cathedral back in February. So they finally got to finish the cathedral. It was designed by Gaudi, Spanish architect, and he started this in 1882, and he was just consumed by it and lived only a couple of 100 feet away from it, but he was killed when he was hit by a bus in 1926. So their goal was to try and get the whole thing completed in 2026, which is a 100-year anniversary of his passing. So that evidently is, they're going to have an opening ceremony for that. It's open, you can go in and visit, but they're going to have the ceremony for the final construction of that later this year. So just an idea of cathedrals. Now, one of the things that got me into this was the fact that it takes a hell of a long time to build cathedrals. So I don't know if many of you know this, but Notre Dame took 182 years to build. Like I said, began in 1163 and was finished 1345. So the person who laid the foundation stone never got to see his final vision. And that's what this is about. You have to, how do you pass on the vision from one generation to the next, all the skills, upgrade it so that the final product is what the person initially set out to do. So, just you see here the different time it took to build certain cathedrals throughout the years. But if we think in terms of generation in industry or at work, I mean, how often have you changed jobs, or do leaders change jobs? Say 3 to 5 years. So if we call that a generation, and you're trying to change a culture or something, that's not going to happen in 3 to 5 years. It's going to take multiple generations. So how do you set up the foundation? How do you create the vision so that people will be able to carry on what that original vision was meant to do? And you're right, folks, it's the St. Louis Cathedral in New Orleans. And that too, even though it was 400 years later than Notre Dame, still took 61 years to build. It's actually the third cathedral that's in that spot, and that's the one that lasted. The others burnt down, there were fires, etc. But beautiful cathedral, and these are some pictures I took when I was there last year. But again, that took 61 years to build. So the concept is that we want to try and build a lasting, operationally excellent and safe organization, and it's anchored in leadership that we're going to talk a lot about today. The framework for the whole thing combines operational excellence, reliability, learning agility to build a safe, resilient organization that's designed to endure. So, I mean, these cathedrals, they've survived earthquakes and fires and all sorts of stuff. So taken a long time. They've stood the test of time, and that's what we want to try and do if we're going to build our own organization. Just back quickly to Notre Dame. This is it took 5 years to refurbish. I mean, and people thought that was going to be impossible when the fire happened back in 2019. Macron, the French president, said, "I want to see this back in operation by 2024, which was when Paris had the Olympic Games." They did make the 2024 deadline, but it was December 2024 after the games, but still pretty phenomenal. I was there last year. I couldn't wait to get back to see the new. This is what it looks like, completely really bright, really well done up. And my background too is actually from Notre Dame, but these are pictures from Notre Dame. When they protected, for some of you techies out there, they sprayed the whole place with latex to protect it when they were working inside it after the fire. And then when they pulled the latex off, it took all the grime and 800 years of dirt and dust with it. So it brightened it up. Like, this is what it must have looked like originally when they first built it with the clean stone. So pretty interesting. I put this in here to show what one section of the roof looked like. And interesting fact here too, these were built with oak beams, and they cut down oak trees. They used 2,000 oak trees that they took from the same forest that was used to build the original Notre Dame. So trees were obviously a couple hundred years older, but really fascinating that they took the wood from the same forest as the original building, and they used the same tools that were used 800 years ago to build this. Obviously much better, so the axes were sharper and better metal, but the style and the tools and everything they used 800 years ago is what they try to copy when they were rebuilding it. And 2,000 people were involved in the reconstruction. So pretty phenomenal. I did talk to someone who was involved in the construction there, and there were no fatalities during the 5 years construction, and no major incidents, or as we would define them, SIFs. So pretty interesting too. Okay, everybody still with us? Justin, let's get them, give a thumbs up or whatever.
Put your thumbs up in the chat. Let's see if you're there. Yep.
So how are we going to build our cathedral of operational excellence, and what are we going to focus on the leadership part of it? So first of all, we need to build a strong cultural foundation based on values, trust, and transparency in the organization. The next stage, I'll talk about authentic leadership, and then we'll talk about learning and organizational learning, and that's where I'll focus most of the presentation there today. And if we have time, I can go in deeper to some of the other elements. We'll go really quickly through a technical, everywhere needs technology, so I put that in there. We won't spend much time on that at all. Introduced the concept of mindfulness or chronic unease, which is really the antidote to complacency. Hopefully that can help you. And then ultimately we'll finish or spire, cap the cathedral, talking about HRO, high reliability organizations. If you've heard about those, great. If not, this will be a short introduction to high reliability organizations. So what about values? Everybody, all the companies have them. And I did a Google search and looked at what were the common values of the Fortune 500 companies. And this is what it came up with. From the most often quoted integrity down to service, and I think it gave me about 50, but I just put 20 in here. Short word map there, to let you see how often they're used, and these are the top 500 Fortune 500 companies in the US. So, question: can you see your company's values in there? Or do you have any values in your organization that are maybe not in the top 20? That's always interesting to see too.
They're hitting it up in the chat, Paul. I know you were having trouble seeing it a minute ago. You got yes, 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 yes.
Okay. Anyone got a value that's not on that list? Okay, think about it. You'll get the presentation too later, and if you do have one, then shoot it to me, and I'll compare it, see if it's on the other.
Avery says, Avery says care. Skylar says leadership.
Okay.
Patrick says live and work above the standards. Chanel says reliability.
Okay, some really good ones there. And I'm sure we'll be able to look at some of these too and say, well, maybe care comes under, I don't know, is it responsibility or is it respect, whatever, but it's they're also really good ones too. So, everybody, the values of your organization are really important. It's key when you're trying to set up an organization and get that long-term vision. People can always refer back to their values, and the easier they are, you don't need 20. I mean, the best ones I've seen are 3 or 4. You don't need a whole list of them. If you have 3 or 4, I think that's really a good place to be. So there we've laid our foundations, and the next key element is and again we'll talk a lot about this, is leadership. And a great example or great definition I found from Harvard Business School, I think this is good, is about leadership is all about making others better as a result of your presence, but making sure that the impact lasts in your absence. Right? I mean, how many times do we hear people talking about, how do you define safety culture? Well, it's what happens when the boss isn't around. That's the culture. So if you're a good leader, and you're making others better when you're there, but that impact is still there when you're gone. So it's happening whether you're there or not. That's true leadership. And people talk too about authentic leadership, and it goes beyond transformational leadership, but it has trust as a core component. And authentic leaders, they're typically, here's, again, I got these from different articles and stuff I've read over the years. And we talk about authentic leaders who are confident, hopeful. I mean, think of some of the good leaders you've had in your career, in your time working. And do they exhibit these sort of characteristics? They're optimistic, they're resilient, they're transparent. They're not going to hide something on you. They're very moral or ethical. They're future oriented, and they develop associates to become leaders. Another quote I often use when I talk about this here is that you're not a true leader until you develop a leader who develops a leader. Right? Again, that generational type aspect. And just a plug on my own behalf. Some of you follow me on LinkedIn, but I recently posted a picture on LinkedIn where I had dinner here in Houston with three guys I worked with from Dow, and they were all from China. We all met in China. I hired two of them in Shanghai on the project I was on there. And now, 15 years later, they're all leadership in their own right and developing their own leaders. So we had a great dinner, lots of memories, still lots of contact, but that's, I felt like, hey, I've helped develop leaders who are now developing leaders. And that's what we're trying to do across the board here. And again, these are all things that are based on their own personal values. Do they have that diamond? Do they have that approach? This is what, for me, is going to be sort of the core of our presentation, because we're going to talk about leadership in the safety realm, and in particular the concept of felt leadership. It's one thing, like we said, people have got to understand that they're better also in your absence. And is your leadership felt? And these are 10 characteristics around felt leadership in the safety realm, and I'll go into each one of them. I don't know if some of you have seen this. DuPont used to have a course and a concept of felt leadership and safety. These are slightly modified, but very similar to the DuPont or DSS approach. What I did for this, because the last couple of years, I've had a huge focus on SIF reduction, serious injury and fatalities. I mean, we've all seen the numbers, the TRIR is coming down over the last 10, 20 years, but the number of fatalities and serious injuries is pretty much staying the same. So what I thought I'd do here, and again, you're going to get a copy of this presentation, for each of these elements, I just added my own version or a couple of thoughts on how can we use this element to focus on SIF. So we go through the 10 elements, and each one will have two bullet points related to the focus on SIF. So if you're not into SIF, I'm sorry about that, but I think this is really for industry, for many of our industries, this is really huge, because we're not, despite all the work that's going on, we're not making a huge dent in reducing the number of fatalities. So anything we can do to help reduce that, I think, is going to be huge. So first one is about visible leadership commitment. So it talks about leaders visibly prioritizing safety, both in words and actions, and they allocate time and resources to high risk work. And I put this in here. I think that's a leading in. If you're looking for leading indicators in your organization, does your leadership allocate time and resources to high risk work? Or is it just the same for everybody? Or you've got I don't know, you're cutting back or having to reduce, cost or whatever. Where do you cut first? And are you putting the right time and resources into the high risk work? And obviously, a visible leader will participate actively in field safety engagements. From a SIF perspective, they should personally engage in reviews of high energy, and be always asking the question, where could we seriously injure or kill someone? Are we maintaining that focus? We'll talk a little bit more about that when we talk about chronic unease. Second one is personal accountability, right? Safety ownership can't be delegated. Everybody owns it. Operational leaders own risk in their area. It's not an abdication to safety. I mean, how many times do you see, okay, we've got a safety problem, and where's the safety guy? Well, where's the leader? Where's the leader of the organization? They should be looking at that. And in here too, I want to put a plug too around contract or contract partner risk. That's also included in the accountability equation. A little story around accountability and the safety guy. When I was at Arkema, and I can say this now because I've been gone for a couple of years, we used to have a meeting every year with like the top 150 leaders, and during that, they'd always try and get a group photo. So one of the meetings were 150 leaders on stairs in a hallway, and then the photographer he climbs up on a step ladder and is holding the camera in one hand and onto the step ladder in the other. And across the board, I just heard, Paul. And everybody looks at me, the safety guy. And I thought, well, you guys do something about it. You talk to him, you tell him. But nevertheless, it was a huge improvement over a year earlier. They wouldn't have done that, right? They wouldn't have even recognized the hazard. So, are people abdicating? I mean, I think most people on here are safety professionals. Are people abdicating to you? No, make sure they own it too. It's their accountability, leadership accountability. Again, you see the elements for SIF focus. Then, setting clear safety vision and expectations, make sure people understand, they know what you mean when you're talking about safety performance. What are non-negotiable standards? Do you have life-saving actions or, life-saving rules or whatever you want to call them? Justin will remember this at Entergy. We didn't want to call them life-saving rules because then they're associated with potential consequences and legal get involved and HR and everything. We said these are actions to save lives. So sometimes it's, what you call them and how you do it can make a huge difference. Another area there, just while we're on that with words or semantics, is I'm a huge fan of root cause analysis, not root cause investigations, right? We don't want to investigate. It's we want to analyze and learn from that sort of stuff. Yeah, and here for SIF, we should make sure that we're implementing fatal risk standards, so we have critical controls in place, and that we review critical control failure, because it's when the controls fail that the energy, you get exposed to that energy, and that's what kills. Did I skip one? Yeah, frequent field presence. Again, spend time where work happens. Observe it as learning, not as policing. Again, you're analyzing out there to learn. Look for people doing the right thing, not people doing the wrong thing. If they are doing the wrong thing, let's try and approach it differently and learn from it. And again, build trust with the organization through your presence. Again, on SIF, focus on the high-risk work activities. Ask about energy isolation. Do they understand it? Do they understand the line of fire impact? The contractor interfaces. Some of you will have heard the concept of the sticky. To be polite, the stuff that can kill you, right? It's that's a lot of discussion about that too in the construction industry and utility industry. So, people who are working in that and have been trained in that, you can just go to them and say, okay, where's the sticky today? That's something you can do. Two-way communication. Again, it's not pontificating. It's getting that communication going. It's about, encouraging open dialogue about risk, listening actively to their concerns, and not just listening, but then doing something about it. And then building that concept of psychological safety. Again, for SIF, promote reporting of high potential near misses. Fortunately, we don't have a lot of SIFs. And if you're in some of the industries I've worked in, chemical industry, I know many of you here from the chemical industry. Fortunately, we have a whole lot less. But then where do we go for learning? We'll learn from the near misses. Let's use those to be able to capture information on near misses, what could have happened. And then conduct structured SIF learning reviews. Coaching and feedback, key. As a leader, you really need to learn how to coach, how to give feedback, and how to do it well. That that the person will thank you for it when it's done. Provide constructive, real-time feedback. Don't wait for a week afterwards and say, "Hey, I saw you last week. You weren't wearing a seatbelt in the car." It's do it immediately, because the memory will go. Reinforce continually the safe behaviors. We'll talk about recognition too. I mean, we work in an industry where we measure failure. I mean, what do we measure? We measure injuries, incidents, all things that happen. So look for ways to do this positively. Oh, the question? No. Okay. And challenge unsafe drift, right? Look at the trends, challenge them, but again, do it respectively. When we're talking about SIF, we talked about the sticky. Ask about what's the worst credible outcome that could happen here. Test assumptions and then review them in after action reviews. I've been doing a lot of work recently around debriefs after work or after action review, whatever you want to call them. But personally, I think this is a huge area that we're not mining correctly. Be interesting to know any thumbs up for anybody who does. Do you do good after action reviews or debriefs in your organization? And then how do you take that information and learn from it so that others can do that too? I mentioned the recognition and reinforcement. Again, let's celebrate proactive safety behaviors. We spend too much time in accident analysis and stuff like that, and it can get you down. Let's look for positive things. I got this at the, let's see it, little statuette team I was on at the ASSP Christmas party here in Houston, and we came third in the safety quiz. So that was pretty cool. Everybody likes to get a little recognition, and in that respect too, don't forget your leadership. I mean, it shouldn't be up to them to be handing out recognition. If they're doing a good job, recognize them too. So that's good. Recognize intervention and hazard reporting, right? And again, reinforce the positive culture that you're trying to develop. From a SIF perspective, you could recognize stop work authority use. I know one of the companies we work with at Entergy, uh, when they introduced the stop work authority, they they had a drawing every quarter, I think, for everybody. If they had a stop work authority that was approved, I think they got $50. Then they went into a drawing, and every quarter they would draw for $1,000 for the people who had used the stop work authority appropriately. And again, early detection of fatal risk. I mean, if you can catch it beforehand or before it becomes even a near miss, then that's great, and let's celebrate that. Consistent consequences. And I know Brian last week, he alluded to this, and I said I'd talk a little bit more about this. You might have heard from James Reason, the father of just culture. Really great approach. I'm a huge fan of this. We talk about no blame, but that does not mean no accountability. So the concept of just culture, I think, is a much better approach to be able to apply fair and consistent accountability. You got to differentiate the different error types and maintain the integrity of the system. And there need to be clear consequences for the for any violations. I have the small version here, and I added this as one of the tools that you might be able to take away. This over the years I've been involved with this. This is to me the simplest and one of the most obvious just culture decision trees that I found in the literature. I think it's really well set up. So you can see there's 4 tests: an intention test, a policy test, the substitution test, and then what they call the personal history test. So very simple to follow. I challenge you to take this and use it on a recent incident you might have had and just see how quickly you can get to, in many cases, you see on the right, the very right here, no blame error, right? And we worked with this in France, where they have pretty strong and tough unions, and the unions all bought into this because it was well laid out, it was well defined. And while we might not always get to end up at a substitution test or something in here, we were never, three columns apart. So really simple thing to use. Were the actions intended? In many cases, no. Did the person knowingly disobey policy standards and or procedures? I think in a lot of cases that's a no too. This is one of the key questions that they call the substitution test, which asks, would someone of equal experience, knowledge, and competency carry out the task in the same way? And if the answer there, if everyone's been trained that way, if the answer there is yes, then the last question is, do they have a history of disobeying procedures? In most cases, that's going to be a no. And that's why when you use this, 90% of the cases we used it in, we ended up at no blame error. So you can't blame the person. When you start looking at some of these others, it ends up being a system error, system failure, training, that sort of stuff. The only one where you should have a really serious consequence in the intention test if it's really sabotage or a malicious act. And that's where it's pretty clear. The actions were intended and the results were intended. So this, yeah, there's someone trying to ask a question. Oh,
Hey Wayne, is that you on? I see you're off mute. Is that you, Wayne?
oh.
Did you have a question? All good, Paul. Go ahead.
No,
Okay.
sir.
And then, okay, number 9, the 9th element is then ownership at all levels. Again, we talked about it, don't defer everything to the safety guys. Safety leadership is distributed across the organization. Frontline supervisors should shape the daily risk conditions, and contractors are held to the same standard. So it's many of the companies I've worked, in fact, all the companies I worked with, we counted contract partner injuries along with their own and treated everyone the same and held everybody to the same standard. When I was at Dow and people would ask how many people work in safety, we'd say 50,000. There were 50,000 people working for Dow and everybody worked in safety. And that's what I aspired to whenever I moved to other organizations. So again, it's everybody works in safety. And one for the ownership from a SIF perspective, focus on verification of the critical controls before work begins. I mean, there's a lot of work going on. If you understand where the exposure is and what controls you're going to put in place, and then verify that those controls are in place and will actually function so that if energy is released, the control will work and the person will not be exposed. Finally, we all talk about it, PDCA, Plan, Do, Check, Act, continuous improvement, learn from events and near misses, use the data to strengthen the systems, adapt them based on the lessons learned. And again, the SIF domain, track your precursors and the capacity, and conduct learning reviews for high potential events. Again, the near misses, don't wait for the SIF to occur. Do good learning reviews and analysis of the high potential learning events. So that's really sort of in a nutshell, the 10 elements of felt leadership from a safety perspective. And, you can use these to look at, do I master all of these? Are there areas that I should develop in? Can I share these with operations leaders so that they start looking at this and say, okay, what can we do? It's operations own safety, so they should be able to show this felt leadership too. And we talked a lot about learning, and that's sort of the next phase of our cathedral. And I love this quote from Gandhi, which says, live every day as your last, but learn as if you're going to live forever. And it's something, you heard I started work for Dow in 1985, so you can guess how old I am. But I like to learn too, and always trying different things. There's, now we're in the age of AI, right? I took a couple of courses at Vanderbilt University to learn how to work better with AI, and it's absolutely phenomenal. So, always learn, go to conferences, talk to other people, and try and keep learning as long as you can. Amy Edmondson, you might have heard of. She's often recognized as the mother of psychological safety. If you haven't read the book, it's there, The Right Kind of Wrong. A quote from the book says, the science of failing well starts with a clear-eyed diagnosis of failure type so you can better understand, learn from, and most importantly, prevent as many destructive failures as possible. So she talks a lot about that, a lot of experience more in the medical field, and there when you make mistakes, people tend to die. But really a lot of stuff that has been taken in psychological safety and applied in our industries. Again, another personal plug here. When I was at Arkema, we worked on this. The chart in the middle is what they call a learning map, and I think there's some ex-Arkema people in here too, and they can probably validate this. But Arkema was a relatively new company, didn't really have a long-term vision, strategy, or a culture in place. And we worked with a group to develop what we called our Arkema safety culture, and we rolled this out to 19,000 people in 50 countries to develop one corporate identity. And you can see this is actually, I got this 2 weeks ago, the latest chart, which goes down to 2025, how the TRIR has improved over time and continues to improve. So we implemented this around 2013, 2014, and it kept going. And this is used for onboarding. Arkema bought a company, Bostik, which included about 50 plants and 5,000 people. This was used to onboard them so that they all understood, what's safety at Arkema, how do we do things, and how are we going to get to the top of the mountain here, which is, again, the focus on zero as possible. And even when, just as a matter of interest, even when we do get there are other mountains to climb. So if you think you're there, you're not. And as you can see from the chart, they are getting better, but it gets harder the further you go, closer you get to zero. So that was, I said that was one of the things I left at Arkema, what I'd consider part of my legacy there. We want to talk a little bit about legacy. And I was really happy to see this photograph on LinkedIn last year from a team in Germany. They put up a photograph or something. And here in the background, I saw that the chart that we developed, the learning map, is still being used to this day. So that was, again, another positive for me to say, okay, they're still using this. That's really good. It must have worked, and it helps ground everybody and get people on the same page. Not going to spend time on this. I told you at the beginning where, there's technical aspects in every organization. They're all different and too diverse to talk about here, but these are just a couple of examples that you might think of. I want to talk a little bit about this concept of mindfulness or chronic unease. I think if you look at many of the accident analyses or investigations that you do, a lot of times what comes out is that there was a sense of complacency. How did it happen? The person had done this so many times, and they were complacent. That's why the incident happened. I mean, we do it ourselves too in our personal lives. So how do we get around this? And two things to think about, two tools that we can use is the concept of mindfulness. And it's about training yourself to pay attention in a specific way. So when you're mindful, you're focused on the present moment, you're not multitasking. So any on there multitasking, let's get a thumbs up to show that you're not multitasking, you're listening. If you're multitasking, you're not mindful, right? You got to focus on the present moment, purposefully concentrate on what's happening around you. So when you're in the field, when you're working on a job, you're looking around, are there people above you, below you? What's the traffic like? That sort of stuff. You'll see here this phrase, it says shishikanko. Anybody know what that is? Anybody heard of that? That comes from Japan. And it's an approach they use in Japan that engages three senses, three of your senses. And the classic example they use for this is like a train conductor on the subway, and he'll point at the clock on the wall and say, okay, it's 11:15. He'll point down, and he speaks out loud. He'll point down the what's the word? The length of the train, make sure there's nobody standing indoors, and I say, I'm closing all the doors, and then we're ready to go. So he's pointing, he's thinking, and just engage, and his eyes are being engaged as well. So that's one thing you could do as well. Point to where you're going to go. Years ago, when I was in a plant where they were doing a tour, and we didn't want people walking and talking. You've heard the phrase, walking is working. Well, the person doing the plant tour, and I think it's a great best practice, we would start and say, everybody stationary. We're going to go over there and we're going to see this on the way, but we're just going to go and nobody talks on the way. You get to the next point, you explain either what you've seen or where you're going to go to next. So same approach, pointing, talking, pointing, calling, and engaging, your listening, your vision, and then your direction senses. So something you can try when you go out next time. And then this element, this concept of chronic unease, which includes a competence element and a care element. The competence is knowing and understanding what and where the barriers are, and that you need to stay safe. But the care is all about the behavior exhibited to make the barriers effective. And someone mentioned care as a value earlier on. I mean, I think this is a good reason why it should be in there. So kudos to you guys. Another great example here is, if you want to help explain this simply, is think of seatbelts, right? Everybody knows, everybody has the competence to know a seatbelt is there to save lives, but you need to exhibit the care by putting it on, right? So you might have the competence, but if you don't have the care, it's not going to work. So staying safe, I got this from Corey Pitzer. He defined safety as the readiness to respond to risk relentlessly. So you're able to respond, you're ready to do it, you can respond to the risk relentlessly. You're mindful of the risk, and because it's relentless, you're thinking about this all the time. And then here in the middle, is probably the best definition of chronic unease. It's really about noticing weak signals and responding to them in a much stronger way. That's ultimately what it boils down to. So now we're at the top of the cathedral, right? We're going to cap the cathedral off with the spire. And this is all about HRO, high reliability organizations. The book on the left, Managing the Unexpected by Wyke and Sutcliffe, has been my Bible about HROs, and very easy to read. It's about 160 pages. It gets into a little bit of the history of HROs and what it's all about, and they're really about eliminating and mitigating unplanned events. They talk a lot about how they react. How do they react? They react mindfully. So that's where we get back into the whole mindfulness concept as well. Briefly, some examples of the HROs here. And ultimately they have what they call 5 tenets of a high reliability organization. 3, how do they prepare? How do they do things before to make sure they don't have an unplanned event? And they're the preoccupation with failure. What are we focusing on? We're always thinking about, what can go wrong? Do we do the right drills? Are we planning for that? It's not, how often do you do a drill, or how often do you practice? And you've heard the saying, practice makes perfect, but it doesn't. Perfect practice makes perfect. That's the difference here. So it's you get out of what you put into it. The better you practice, the better you're going to be able to handle the real events. There's a huge reluctance to simplify. How do we interpret data? You're in a control room. There's all these, alarms going off all the time. Oh, they're nuisance alarms. Well, a HRO will dig into that nuisance alarm, figure out why is it there, and how are we going to get rid of that? And then a sensitivity to operations, understanding the overall processes and how different learnings applies. So when we hear something new, how do we apply it to our process? And then, it's going to hit the fan, so you're going to get unplanned events. How do we contain that unplanned event. And that's where HROs, they have a commitment to resilience. How do we mitigate that? A lot is because they've done a lot of good planning. They've trained for these type of things. And then the final one is what they call a deference to expertise about how we manage knowledge. So, when something goes wrong, does it go up the chain of command to the top guy on top of the totem? Or do they defer to the people who have the expertise and knowledge of those systems rather than the hierarchy? So that's that's what really shows what a HRO is and how they differ from regular teams. So yeah, I use the Strasbourg Cathedral to sort of build this. So I always leave the spire open to say, okay, what's the missing link? Where do we go on this? When I first introduced this years ago, I used it to introduce the concept of neuroscience and safety. We're not doing that here today because I have what I call our G.O.L.D series cathedral. And, Justin started this a couple of weeks ago where he laid the foundation talking about growth and grit. Brian, last week, he was talking about ownership and opportunity. And I'm talking this week about legacy leader development. And then next week, we'll hear from Darrell Hill on discipline and decisions. So this is sort of, we're trying to build our, if we maintain this cathedral thinking approach, we're trying to build this this cathedral to help us in our endeavors. I told you earlier I had a little bit of did a lot of stuff with AI. I put my stuff through and I asked AI to give me a rap song. So I didn't have enough time to practice this with Justin, but this is the sort of thing we would have done back at Entergy. Justin was one of my TikTok twins. Uh, and we had a lot of fun. You got to be able to have fun too. So, my chorus here is with grit and trust, we ignite the flow, one team, one dream, ready to go. High reliability org, that's the way to show that the only way to go is build a HRO. So, if you want a little rap song, get some people involved. It'll help you learn the concept. So that's just to have a little bit of fun in there. And then, okay, so what are takeaways? Whether you're building a cathedral or a culture of operational excellence, it's not a 90-day program, right? So you got to have patience. That's really, we're thinking multi-generational, right? So there's no app for it. We're in the age of apps and everything. You want to get an app for this. There's not an app for it, and it's not digital either. We got to start with a vision, build on that strong culture of trust and transparency, and then sell the vision on why. Another shout out to, I think Justin had mentioned Simon Sinek a couple of weeks ago too. Two great books he's written that really help in this perspective. One, Start with Why, and then another called The Infinite Game, which again is are we just here for a short time, or are we going long term? And The Infinite Game is a really good book. I love that book. And then again, what are we talking about here? Leadership. Without true leadership at each stage, you're never going to get to complete it. So that's why the leadership element is so important. And I'll finish with a quote that says, "A society grows when old men plant trees whose shade they will never enjoy." Right? So, what they say, the best time to plant a tree is 30 years ago. The second best time is today. So that's basically it. Have you started on your cathedral yet? That's all I had. So if there's any questions, feel free to put your hand up. But Justin, I assume you can direct flow in that direction.
Yep, absolutely. If you got a question, we got a couple minutes for questions. If you want to ask Paul a question, please jump in, raise your virtual hand. I'm monitoring the list now. You want to drop it in the chat, that's fine too. I'll monitor that. Shout out to Paul there. Thank you for bringing the cathedral thinking. I love the rap song. That was good. You're getting good at those things. So, that's good. Any questions? Chanel says, love this all. Thank you. And it resonates. I did have a question earlier, I thought we'd come back to. Steve says, how many people do you involve when working through the Just Cause matrix, Paul? Are there certain parties who would need to be included on the team, like HR, LR, manager, safety, etc.? What are your thoughts on that, Paul?
I think it should be, it's a great question. And I don't think HR should be involved because you're trying to look at for your organization from a technical perspective first. If you're a union organization, you should have a union representation in there that helps again trust and transparency. But it shouldn't be. I'd say I've never done that with more than 5 people. So try and keep it small. It's not something you do first. It's if there's human error involved after you go through your analysis and that type of thing. Say, okay, let's see where could we place it, and do we need, how do we have accountability in this situation? So I wouldn't go with more than 5. Um,
Any other questions for Paul? Thanks for that. Great answer. Any other questions for Paul before we get wrapped up? No questions so far. Paul, I'm gonna put the slide up and kind of give us some closing thoughts here to let everybody go. Let me try to share that again. That was not the right share screen. Give me just a second. Okay. So thank you again, Paul. Just for our folks in the ASSP Greater Baton Rouge area, this week is the golf tournament. If you're going to be around, we'd love for you to participate. You can sign up, scan a QR code there for more information. All the benefits for the golf tournament goes to the ASSP Foundation. For Paul, if you don't mind, go ahead and scan that QR code. Give him feedback. We're going to give that information to him. Let him know what you said. And thank you again, Paul. It was great. Always love hearing the cathedral thinking. Just gets me fired back up to keep on building. Right? It takes a journey. It's a journey, and it's time to plant the trees. For those that want CEUs. Again, same concept. If you were on the call today, your email has been registered with us. We will send you an email within a day or so of that CEU that you can get for this session. Thank you again for watching, being a part, engaging with Paul. Any other last final thoughts? We've got 3 more minutes. Last final thoughts. Avery, was that a question? I seen you pop your hand up and then it went right back down. Avery. Okay, maybe not. Oh, it was okay. All right, no problem, Avery. Anybody else? Paul, let's give Paul a round of applause just with our virtual applause there. Thank you again, Paul. We really enjoyed it. It was great. Lots of takeaways I know here. So thank you again. Thank you all for joining. Hope you have a great week. Steve, I see that. If you didn't get the email, I will check into that for you. Again, thank you all for attending, and look for the rewind. I've been posting the recaps, all the videos, so you'll see those within a week or time. But check out our LinkedIn page. You can see those. Y'all have a great weekend. Thank you.
Thanks, Justin.
Thank you, Paul.